like to feel comfortable, safe, and secure. We want our routines, schedules, our patterns, and predictability. So much so that when we are asked to do something outside of our comfort zone, something that we cannot control, most of the time our answer is no. We like the bubble we live in, not only because it's comfortable, but also because it's familiar. We know what it is, or more likely, we know what to expect. In the verses that Jill just read, Jesus is doing some unexpected things and definitely in a surprising way. Jesus and his disciples crossed over to the land of Gergesa, opposite Galilee. As Pastor Tom explained last week, Jesus and his disciples had not been in this area yet and were probably looking for some solace from the crowds that Jesus had been teaching. But I think Jesus had another reason in mind. He wanted to continue to push his disciples outside of their comfort zone, to show them what things were going to look like when he was gone, and that only sometimes it was going to be full of miracles and teachings. Remember that during the storm, they were fearful. Even though they should have been comfortable on the boat, they were not. Then Jesus takes them to the other side of the sea, and things get really interesting. Now, there's a lot to unpack in the 20 verses that were just read, so I feel like a little Bible history lesson might be necessary for this. This particular story is found in 3 of the 4 Gospels, Mark having the longest and most detailed account. I think that signifies that it's pretty essential. The land that they went to was on the other side of the sea and not in Jewish territory. How do we know this? Well, the pigs are a good sign of that. According to the Torah, or the law of Moses, pigs are considered unclean. Not too long ago in our Bible 365 daily readings, we read in Leviticus 11:7, and the pig, though it has a split hoof completely divided, does not chew the cud. It is unclean for you. So we can assume that this area was considered unclean to the Jews. Not only were the pigs unclean, but the Gentiles, the non-Jewish people, would have been considered unclean as well. And if those two were not enough, they landed in a graveyard. A graveyard for Jews, contact with the graves or with the dead, made them unclean also. So Jesus took them into one of the most unclean situations that he could have. He took them outside of their comfort zone. We then come to the demon-possessed man. He was a man who seemed hardly human anymore. He was basically an animal. Verses 2-5 read, "When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an impure spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones." This man was clearly out of his mind. He was dangerous and violent. He had lost his identity. He was completely out of control. At this point, if I were the disciples, I would have gotten back on the boat. I wouldn't have stuck around. Pastor Jim this week emailed me and asked what direction I was taking the sermon since he was doing the children's message. And he jokingly said, "I can always talk to the kids about demon possession and exorcising demons. That could be fun." While exorcising demons is the title of this message, I want to challenge you to think about the demons in this story as not only those that possessed the man, but those demons that caused the disciples to doubt and question. The demons that cause us to doubt and question too. Remember, Jesus took them into an unclean land outside of their comfort zone. Jesus knew that his time on earth would soon end, and these disciples would be tasked with building the church. He was showing them what the future might look like when they go into foreign lands to spread the good news of Christ. I love mission trips. My first big mission trip was in 1990 to the then Soviet Union on a mission of peace with the Northeast jurisdiction of the United Methodist Church. It was different from what most consider a mission trip. We didn't build anything, we didn't feed the hungry, but we were immersed in the culture of the USSR. For 2 weeks, we traveled from Moscow to Leningrad, now St. Petersburg, and then to Tallinn, Estonia. We visited churches and schools and learned what it was like to live in a communist country. We prayed for the underground churches and conveniently forgot to take our Bibles home after we left the services. This was definitely the trip of a lifetime to a country that very few have ever visited. And while this was about as far as I could get from Pittsburgh, it was no more impactful than serving at the Daily Bread feeding ministry on the North Shore of Pittsburgh. In January, I took a few students and adults to distribute the coats that we had collected during our annual coat drive and to serve lunch. I asked those that went with me what they thought about the experience, and they responded that while they were nervous and maybe a little uncomfortable, that they loved the experience. While at Daily Bread, we learned that Pastor Bob treats everyone who enters his doors as someone of sacred worth, someone who needs not only a meal, but community. People to listen to their stories and to treat them as Jesus treated the man at the tombs. Jesus saw that man as a human being created in God's image, a person of sacred worth who is loved and pursued by God. This summer, our student ministry will take 2 mission trips, one to Chicago, Illinois, and one to Jamonville to serve the Connellsville Uniontown area. During those trips, I will push our students and volunteers outside of their comfort zones. However, I will never take them into an unsafe situation or a dangerous situation, and I will not ask them to do anything that I am unwilling to do. This is what Jesus was doing when he went across the sea. He wanted to show his disciples what things might look like after he was gone, but he had it all under control. In verses 6 through 10, it says, "When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, 'What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me.' For Jesus had said to him, 'Come out of this man, you impure spirit.' Then Jesus asked him, 'What is your name?' 'My name is Legion,' he replied, 'for we are many.' And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. Jesus did what anyone should do when confronted with a demon. He named it. He asked its name. And then he listened to the man and saw him for who he was, a child of God. And when the demons left the man, the townspeople found him sitting with Jesus, dressed and in his right mind. Is there anything more beautiful than that? He was with Jesus, fully clothed and perfectly sane. The people of the town, including the man himself, had given up attempting to see a human being beneath all of his demonic behaviors. But Jesus always retained sight of him. We fear stepping outside of our comfort zones because we might encounter something or someone scary. Then what do? Underneath that rough exterior is a hurting, frightened, broken human being who needs someone to love them so that they can bloom, grow, and regain their sense of integrity, identity, and self-worth. We must remember that when serving God in whatever mission field he calls us to, we must remember this. And we must also not forget that we are all one decision away from being in their shoes. We should not be surprised, however, to face opposition when following Jesus. Instead, we should expect it. Satan does not want us to follow the Lord, and he will put demons in our path. He also does not want us to tell others about Jesus or teach others about him. That is why mission work can be so challenging and scary. Satan will do whatever he can to derail us. Our vision at Due Till Church is We envision a community where everyone is known by name, loved for who they are, and empowered to follow Jesus Christ. That is precisely what this story is about. Having been miraculously transformed by Christ's love, grace, and power, the man begs to follow Jesus. And who can blame him? Here in his native land, where he had been absolutely no one, not even viewed as a human, what reason was there for him to stay? Jesus had quickly become the world to him. Yet, while Jesus regularly invited people to follow me, this time he would not let the man come. Verse 19 tells us, Jesus did not let him, but said, "Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." This former demon-possessed man becomes a successful missionary to the surrounding Greek cities of the Decapolis. How do we know this? Well, soon in Mark 6, we will hear of the feeding of the 5,000 in Galilee, in Jewish territory. And then in Mark 8, there's another feeding called the feeding of the 4,000. This feeding happens when Jesus returns to the Decapolis in the in the Gentile territory. So where did the 4,000 people come from? Could it be that they showed up because of this former demon-possessed man? The one who had been wandering about, preaching and telling people what Jesus had done for him? The one who was not trained in missionary work. He didn't attend a seminary. He didn't go to Bible college or even a short training. Jesus sent him out to share the gospel less than 1 hour after his salvation. This man did not know much and probably could not have answered many questions, but he knew what Jesus had done for him, and he could tell others about it. He turned his trials into his testimony. Could it be? I think so. I think the ultimate outcast transformed into the ultimate evangelist. The people of Gergesa had pleaded with Jesus to leave their region, but the seed had been planted, and now 4,000 people were showing up to hear Jesus speak. The same goes for us. Jesus asked this man to share his story. We are also tasked with sharing our stories. That is what mission work is all about. It's not about the construction projects or the food boxes. It is about building relationships and spreading our stories of redemption. This formerly uncontrolled man was obedient in sharing his story. Sometimes we think that knowledge is a sign of maturity. It isn't. Obedience is. Jesus told him to do one thing, and he did it. Are you obeying what God has told you to do? Or have you lost your way and are searching for your identity? Jesus shows us compassion by always believing in what we can become. 11 of the 12 disciples who traveled with him that day became apostles after Jesus' death and resurrection. Peter, who denied Jesus, proclaimed the gospel in the early church. Paul, who persecuted Christians, founded several churches in the Roman Empire and still teaches us today how to live a Christian life with the letters he wrote in the New Testament. Even though he doubted, Thomas went on to spread the gospel as far as India. They stepped outside of their comfort zones. What will happen if we leave our comfort zones and tell our stories? What will Do Till Church become as we seek Christ in this community by loving God, loving others, and loving to serve? What transformations will occur in our lives as a community and as a church as we allow Jesus to drive out our demons and show us compassion for believing in what we can become? This man's healing continued, the man from Gergesa, and his transformation became more and more complete as he told others through words and primarily through actions how much God had done for him. Don't let the demons stop you from becoming the person God created you to be. I think I need to say that one again. Don't let the demons stop you from becoming the person God created you to be. Exorcise your demons, step out in faith, and watch how Jesus can change the world. Let us pray. Jesus, what a fantastic story of redemption, of a man turning from an outcast to an evangelist. I pray that you exorcise the demons that are preventing us from being the people you created us to be, the demons that are preventing us from being the church you tasked us to build. And Lord, through it all, we will give you praise. Amen.